Welcome to another quiet journey into the distant past. Tonight, we turn down the lights, slow our breathing, and step softly into a world so ancient, so distant, it barely leaves footprints in the soil of time. A world where life was a constant negotiation with the cold, and survival itself was the only form of success. You are about to imagine yourself in the heart of the last ice age. A time when vast sheets of ice moved like mountains, and humanity lived not in cities or villages, but in camps of fur and bone, huddled close to fire, clinging to warmth. As always, we will move slowly and gently through this history, across 4 quiet chapters. First, you will live as a member of an Ice Age hunting camp, feeling each moment as it would have been. Then we will explore the life of one early human whose bones whisper a story from deep time. Next, we'll turn to an ancient mystery, the art left behind on cold cave walls. And finally, we'll take a quiet walk through the contrasting life of the Ice Age elite, if such a term could even apply to that world. So, settle in, let your mind drift, and prepare to step into the past. Imagine yourself waking beneath a low shelter made of mammoth hide, stretched tightly over curved bones. The air is heavy with the scent of old smoke and damp fur. Outside, the wind never stops. It howls softly one moment, then shrieks without warning the next. There is no true silence here, only the wind and the constant cracking of ice in the far distance. Your body aches from sleeping on packed earth and woven mats. There's no softness here, only necessity. Beside you, a small fire crackles, its warmth barely enough to fight the freezing dark. You stir, pulling a reindeer hide cloak closer, and prepare for the work of staying alive. The day begins not with tasks, but with decisions. Should the hunters go west toward the herds, or east toward the river, where fish move beneath thin sheets of ice? Food is always uncertain. Even with mammoth meat drying near the fire, it may not last. Spoilage, scavengers, or simple misjudgment can render a successful hunt meaningless. You step outside and feel the cold like a wall. The air bites at any exposed skin. The sky is a pale, endless gray. The land around you is open tundra, scattered with low shrubs and snow-crusted stones. In the far distance, you see the slow migration of reindeer. But they are wary. They have learned to fear your kind. Your hands are raw from scraping hides and shaping flint tools. Each tool is your survival. A scraper, a spear point, a knife made of sharpened bone. Nothing is wasted. Tendons become cord, bones become weapons. Even dung becomes fuel. This is not a world of abundance, it is a world of making do. There is danger too, not just from the cold or hunger, but from wolves, from other humans, from missteps near the fire, or falls on hidden ice. One wrong move can turn a person into a memory. The elders teach you where to walk, what to avoid, and how to read the sky for signs of change. Storms can appear in minutes. Blizzards come without warning. The world is not your friend, but it can be endured if you respect its rhythm. Children laugh sometimes, wrapped in furs, playing with carved figures or bits of ivory. There is affection here and joy, but it is quiet, careful joy. The kind that doesn't linger too long. You do not bathe. You rarely see your reflection. You know yourself by how others speak to you, how they rely on you, how you work. As night comes, you return to your shelter. The fire burns low. You lie beside your kin, wrapped in layers, listening to the wind return. You survived another day, but it is never guaranteed. Our next step in this quiet journey leads us deeper into the past, not through living memory, but through the gentle language of bones. In the low, mist-laced hills of Wales lies a cave, still and silent, where once more than 30,000 years ago, a group of humans paused long enough to bury one of their own. The body was carefully placed in the earth and dusted with red ochre, iron-rich powder the color of dried blood. To those who buried him, this may have symbolized life, or death, or something older still. At first, the archaeologists who found these remains named them the Red Lady, a poetic name for what they believed was a woman's burial. But the truth, as it often does in archaeology, shifted slowly over time. Further study revealed that this was not a woman, but a young man, tall, broad-shouldered, likely in his 20s. And yet, the name endured. The Red Lady, despite the correction, remains a symbol of our deep human past. Picture him, tall for his time, with strong limbs and a life written in the wear of his bones. He was likely a skilled hunter, accustomed to long treks across difficult terrain, to the rhythm of group life, to hunger, to repetition. Yet, something about his death warranted attention. His burial was not careless. It was not hidden or hasty. It was deliberate. It was human. Grave goods were placed around him. Ivory rods, possibly decorative or symbolic, flint tools, perhaps his own, and a pendant carved from animal bone. These objects, small and easily lost, were preserved by the cave's steady chill. They whisper to us across the millennia, and so we wonder, who mourned him? Did someone sing over the grave? Did they mark the site with stones? Did they speak his name for a season or for years? The red ochre is particularly striking. It must have been gathered and prepared beforehand. Some pigments come from distant regions, meaning that even in death, the Red Lady connected distant places. This burial site may have been sacred ground, used for many generations, or it may have been chosen simply for its shelter, its quiet, its view. We know almost nothing about his life. His story is incomplete, but what we do know speaks volumes. He belonged to a people who honored their dead, who believed perhaps that the spirit lingered, or passed on, or returned to the earth in a different form. You can imagine the burial, a cold wind blowing through the cave entrance, torches flickering, shadows dancing across the stone, the group working silently or chanting softly, the ritual not rushed but patient. When we examine his skeleton today, we see more than just a collection of bones. We see the echo of a life lived under hardship and sky, under stars that we still see. His joints tell of long hours crouched by the fire or walking with tools at his side. His teeth show signs of wear from a diet rich in fibers, roots, sinew, and grit. No one lives gently in the Ice Age, yet within that harshness, the Red Lady's burial reminds us of tenderness, of care, of grief. There is something deeply comforting in that, in knowing that even then, when mammoths roamed and the cold could kill in hours, humans still paused to mark a passing, to say goodbye. He remains in the care of scholars now, his bones preserved, his tools catalogued, his grave goods studied, but his mystery, his quiet dignity, lingers. The Red Lady is both forgotten and remembered, both gone and here. And in some small, quiet way, you've met him now. Now we drift into the stillness of the underground. Beneath hills and forests, the earth opens quietly into chambers of shadow and time. These are not places made for comfort. The ceilings are low, the floors uneven. The air is cold and carries the scent of stone, minerals, and ancient ash. But something remarkable waits in this darkness. On the walls of these caves, painted with earth pigments and charcoal, are animals. Great beasts that once thundered across the tundra. Bison, mammoths, reindeer, wild horses, lions with manes like fire. They are not drawn clumsily. They are not symbolic in the way a child's sketch might be. They are elegant, lifelike, as if captured mid-motion. You may have heard of some of these caves, Lascaux, Chauvet, Altamira, but there are hundreds more. Each a whisper from the deep past, each filled with careful, quiet purpose. Why were these paintings made? The truth is, we do not know. Some scholars suggest they were part of hunting rituals, a way to conjure success by capturing the soul of the prey. Others see them as early religious acts, expressions of gratitude or reverence for nature. Some suggest storytelling, or even education. Perhaps young hunters learned from these images. Still others believe it was art for art's sake, a quiet joy in creation, even in an unforgiving world. The artists did not work in haste. They prepared surfaces, mixed pigments using animal fat, ground minerals, even blood. They sometimes scraped the stone to create a canvas. Some images were blown onto walls through hollow bones, creating a soft, diffused spray. Others were etched, layered, or painted with fingers or rudimentary brushes. Imagine the process. A figure deep within the earth, their torch held low, casting flickering shadows that dance across the wall. The silence is complete, broken only by breath and the soft hiss of fire. The painter reaches out, touches the wall, and begins. Some animals are solitary, others are shown in motion, galloping, turning, herding together. In Chauvet Cave, one panel depicts a line of rhinoceroses charging, their heads tilted slightly, their horns raised. The painter knew these creatures, had seen them move, had felt the ground shake beneath their feet. There are signs of ritual too. Some images are repeated, some are covered, as if buried beneath newer works. In certain caves, handprints appear, human hands outlined in pigment, or left as ghostly negatives. These are not just art, they are presence. And in some cases there are geometric symbols, dots, spirals, grids, patterns whose meanings are lost. Perhaps they were calendars, maps, dreams. One theory suggests that the flickering torchlight itself was part of the experience. That the images seen in that unsteady light appeared to move. That the caves were theaters, sacred spaces, memory rooms. The deeper into the cave you go, the more profound the silence becomes. Your breath, your heartbeat, the rustle of your clothing, all seem louder here. And yet the images draw you on. They feel timeless, ancient but familiar. These caves are not random. Many are difficult to access. They require crawling, squeezing, even climbing. Why would anyone go to such lengths to paint where few could see? Perhaps it was not about visibility. Perhaps it was about place, about entering the earth itself, about marking the boundary between the world above and something older, quieter, deeper. When these caves were discovered in the modern era, many dismissed the art as forgeries. They were too sophisticated, too deliberate. But radiocarbon dating proved their age, some over 30,000 years old, more ancient than the pyramids, more enduring than empires. Today, many of the caves are closed to the public. Human breath, light and warmth were slowly destroying the art, but replicas have been made, careful reproductions, because even now the pull of those images remains. What they meant, we may never know. But what they show, care, effort, imagination, tells us something essential. Even in the Ice Age, humans were not just survivors. They were artists. They were dreamers. They reached into the dark and left behind beauty. Let us now turn our thoughts to leadership and to contrast. In the modern mind, leadership may conjure images of crowns, thrones, or towering monuments. But in the deep cold of the Upper Paleolithic world, power wore no gold, built no palace, and left behind no scroll. It was quiet, subtle, woven into daily rhythm, like sinew into thread. Still, clues remain, buried not in texts, but in soil. One such clue lies in the frozen earth of Sungir, in what is now Russia. Here, archaeologists discovered a burial unlike any other from its time. 2 children and an older man laid to rest in ceremonial grace, adorned with over 10,000 ivory beads. Beads that likely took thousands of hours to carve and polish, strung into garments, belts, and headdresses. Spears carved from mammoth tusks lay beside them. Tools of use, yes, but also of honor. These were not the graves of ordinary people. These were not hasty farewells in snow or mud. They were messages, but what were they saying? Perhaps these children were shamans in training. Perhaps they were born into leadership, descendants of a storyteller, a healer, a hunter who had once led the group safely through a harsh winter. Or perhaps they were seen as spiritual vessels, chosen, blessed, their importance not measured in wealth, but in meaning. In Ice Age societies, the idea of hierarchy would have been fluid, practical. Respect may have followed wisdom, age, or intuition. A woman who knew the plants that soothed fevers. A man who understood the migration of caribou. A child who dreamt true dreams. Influence would have rested not in volume or strength, but in presence, in a steady gaze, a soft word offered at the right moment, the willingness to go without so that others might eat. Imagine such a leader, not seated on a raised platform, but crouched by the fire, sharing dried meat, showing a younger hunter how to tie sinew tight around a flint head, their cloak no finer than the others, but their eyes always watching, and still they are remembered. In some Ice Age graves, entire toolkits have been left untouched. Spears, knives, fire-starting kits, symbols perhaps that the person would need these items in the world beyond, or signs that their tools were sacred, not to be reused, that their touch lingered. Some burials include animal teeth, carved bones, and polished stones whose meanings are lost. Perhaps they were talismans, perhaps they were markers of status, but none are ostentatious, none are wasteful. Even the wealthiest grave of the age is still wrapped in scarcity. The people who buried their leaders did so with patience. They dug through frozen earth. They carved ivory in midwinter. They painted graves in red ochre, not for vanity, but for memory, for continuity, for peace. To be respected in such a time meant something more than fame. It meant you were held in the minds of others. You were consulted. You were missed. Your passing created a silence, a pause, a new story to be told around the fire. And leadership, perhaps, wasn't always individual. It could have been shared between kin, between generations, the eldest teaching the youngest. The dreams of one interpreted by the vision of another. Collaboration, not command. And so we see the quiet power of the Ice Age leader, not loud, not distant, but close, present, a warmth in the cold, a memory that lingered. In this final chapter of our journey, we remember that even in a time when each day was a battle against the elements, the need for guidance remained. The desire for someone to follow, someone to trust, and the capacity to honor. It is perhaps the most human impulse of all. As the fire fades to embers, let us drift into the quiet heart of the Ice Age. Not in the harsh light of day, but in the subtle hush of night. Imagine yourself lying in the dim interior of a mammoth bone shelter. Thick hides rustle gently in the wind outside. The cold presses in through every gap, settling over you like an invisible weight. You are wrapped in furs, curled close to others, bodies forming a fragile wall against the dark. Sleep is not guaranteed. It comes slowly here, measured not in hours but in heartbeats and breathing rhythms. The night is not silent, far from it. A distant wolf call echoes low across the tundra, then another, closer. Somewhere nearby, the snow shifts, perhaps under the weight of a hare or something larger. The groan of frozen earth stretches like an ancient sigh. Above, the aurora stirs faint green across the black sky, not with sound, but with the feeling of movement. You try not to move too much. Furs must stay tucked. The cold is patient. It seeps into any exposed skin, into the space between shoulder and neck, between ankle and hide. In the half-dark, others murmur. A child stirs. An elder clears their throat, a sound so ordinary it becomes sacred. You listen for these human signals. In this age, every sound is information. Every breath is reassurance. Outside, near the fire pit, a single flame might still flicker. A watch has been set. Someone is always listening, not because of fear, but because that is how survival works, in shifts, in shared vigilance, in listening. The Ice Age night is not a time of drama, but of depth. Now consider the sounds no longer heard, the low hum of a gathering, the scraping of flint against bone, the rattle of a pouch filled with seeds or carved beads, words, the soft, rhythmic knocking of a stone being shaped. These were the lullabies of the time, not songs, but actions repeated, familiar, reassuring. Sometimes there were songs too, simple, tonal, breath-heavy, not performances but gifts, given freely to no one and everyone, sometimes just humming to the fire. There might be a tale told, quietly, by someone who had seen much, their voice soft, the story long and without clear ending, perhaps about a great beast, or a spirit in the mountains, or the origin of the moon. These stories were not told to entertain. They were told to anchor, to slow the mind, to ease the body, to remind the listener, you are part of something older. You fall asleep, not when the story ends, but somewhere in the middle, where your thoughts blend with the tale, where your dreams pick up the rhythm of the voice and carry it further than waking ever could. And so the Ice Age night passes, breath by breath, whisper by whisper, held together not by warmth or walls, but by each other. Even now, millennia later, we listen for those same things in the dark. The voice that says you are not alone, the rhythm that slows your thoughts, the story that lets you sleep. Imagine waking to the soft creak of stretched hide above you, the breath of frost curling faintly in the early morning air. You're small. You haven't yet been given a spear. Your place is closer to the center of the fire circle, between elders and mothers, between warmth and shadow. Childhood in the Ice Age was brief, yet deep, not measured in toys or schooling, but in subtle apprenticeship. Watching, listening, mimicking. Every gesture was a lesson, every mistake a cost. Still, a child's world was not only one of survival, it was filled with small wonders, textures, sounds, stories, and patterns. You might begin the day with tasks, though they wouldn't feel like chores, carrying firewood, weaving plant fibers, collecting water in a hide pouch half your size. Your fingers are red from the cold, but nimble. Older children show you how to hold the bundle just right, so it doesn't fall apart in the wind. In your free time, though no one would call it that, you scratch shapes into dirt with bones. You trace the spirals you see in stones, mimic the patterns left behind by mammoth tusks dragged across the snow. These are not idle doodles. They're memory work, hand training, symbols. The adults don't interrupt you. They notice, but they don't praise. They observe what you choose to do when no one is watching. That's how they learn who you're becoming. Your toys, if you can call them that, are pieces of broken tools. A dull flint shard, a carved antler with no purpose. Perhaps a small animal figure, if someone took the time to make one. You carry it in a pouch, or hide it near your sleeping space. It's not a game piece. It's something else, comfort, luck, perhaps a future version of yourself. You do not learn through words alone. You learn through watching bodies move, a hunter's stance, the way an elder lifts a stone and turns it in the hand, the pause before a cut is made. These are the books of your world, muscle and rhythm and repetition. There are no lectures, but there are stories, and they're told again and again. Some are about animals, how the reindeer knows when to migrate, or why the raven calls before snow. Some are warnings, about the cliff with the hidden edge, or the river that swallowed a careless child. Others are longer, dreamlike, the kind told slowly with pauses, while furs are mended and firewood crackles in the dark. At night you nestle close to your kin, listening. Sometimes you ask questions, sometimes you don't. Sometimes the stories change and no one corrects them. Change is part of the truth. You may be given tasks of increasing difficulty, making cordage, learning to recognize animal tracks, carving a pattern into a soft stone without breaking it. Small tests that no one names as tests, they just watch. And if you succeed, the next task is harder, not to challenge you, but to prepare you. Children are not sheltered from hardship. You see death early, an elder who never rises again, an animal brought back with open ribs and heavy silence. These are not hidden, but neither are they explained in long words. They are felt, lived, shared through glances and gesture. But Ice Age childhood is not bleak. There is laughter, though it is quiet. A game of pretend hunting, a stick waved like a spear at nothing in particular. You and a friend giggling over nonsense, rolling in snow, competing over who can balance on a log the longest. You feel pride when you're finally allowed to join in real work, holding a torch for someone chipping flint, being trusted to guard the meat as it dries, carrying messages between camps. These things matter. They tell you you belong. And always there is the presence of elders, watching from the edges, saying little but always near. Their hands have done these tasks thousands of times. When they finally speak to correct you, it means they believe you're ready to understand. Some children do not live long. That is the truth. Illness, cold, injury, all could take a life quickly. But those who grow older carry more than memories. They carry roles. They become the keepers of what came before. Because even at 5 winters old, a child remembers the voice of a grandparent, the way they sang to the fire, the sound of their breathing in the night. And so, in the Ice Age, childhood is not a stage to pass through. It is a thread woven tightly into the fabric of the group, a source of motion, mimicry, and memory, a continuation of what was, and a preparation for what must be. When you imagine yourself there, small, wrapped in heavy furs, sitting cross-legged with a carved stick in your hand, remember this: even in the coldest world, life begins with warmth, with watchfulness, with quiet continuity. You would not have toys, but you would have meaning. You would not have schooling, but you would be seen. And that, in a time before written history, was the greatest education of all. Imagine the air inside the shelter, thick with the scent of smoke, crushed herbs, and damp hides. You sit near the center, where the warmth still lingers. Outside, snow falls in heavy silence. Inside, someone coughs. In the Ice Age, medicine was not something that happened in buildings or by specialists in white coats. It was closer, slower, learned through years of watching plants, patterns, pain, and sometimes healing. There were no words for doctor, but there were those who knew. Imagine a woman, middle-aged, wearing a tunic darkened with time and stained with ochre around the hem. Her hair is grey at the edges. Her fingers are stained from grinding bark. She knows how to find the plant that dulls pain, how to steep it, chew it, bind it. She does not explain in long words. She gestures, she hums, she watches. Perhaps she learned from someone now gone. Someone whose memory still lingers in the pauses between her sentences. Her knowledge isn't written, but it's precise. She knows which mushroom not to touch. She knows when a fever signals death, and when it might simply burn itself away. She knows how to clean a wound with ash and cold water, and how to bind it with fiber soaked in boiled pine resin. There is no mystery to her, but there is awe. She is not alone. In many Ice Age groups, healing was shared, a network of knowledge, passed not in lectures but in hands. You might have seen a cousin learn how to place heated stones near a sore limb, or watched an uncle crush certain leaves between his teeth and spit them onto a sting. There were rituals too, though not as we imagined them. No grand displays, just gestures, whispered songs. The way the healer touched a brow, slowly, twice. The way a stone was placed beside the fire before beginning. The medicines were found in the world itself. Birch bark for antiseptic, willow bark to ease pain, moss for bandages, charcoal to draw out infection. Nothing labeled, everything earned. There were tools, small flint blades, bone needles, antler scrapers, heated stones wrapped in hide, hollow reeds for blowing warmth over frost-bitten skin. Not everything worked. That too was part of the knowledge. Some wounds could not be closed. Some coughs would deepen until they became silence. But failure did not mean ignorance. It meant the healer had learned another limit of the body. Sometimes healing was not about stopping death, but easing it, making the body more comfortable, sitting close, sharing warmth. humming low tones, touching the hand of someone slipping away so that they did not leave completely alone. In this world, medicine was not separate from life. It was interwoven with food, with fire, with belief. A healer might use smoke from specific wood or blow gently across a child's chest to chase away the cold. These were not superstitions. They were acts of presence, of participation. Even the dead could heal the living. Bones were not feared. Some were kept. A tooth on a necklace, a carved piece of femur hung near the sleeping place. They reminded the living of those who had endured. You would not find an herbalist or nurse. You would find someone who knew when a wound was clean and when it was not. Someone who saw the right moment to cut. Someone who felt the pulse beneath a rib and knew how fast it should beat. And they did not always explain why. Their knowledge was not a debate, it was a rhythm, like seasons, like breath. If you were injured, they would not rush. They would gather what was needed, sit beside you, and begin with silence. They might grind something while humming, or pass a bone charm over your hand 3 times. You might not understand, but you would feel watched, cared for. That too was medicine. Children learned early. They were taught which plants to avoid, which flowers signaled water, which trees had bark that could be scraped and boiled. The world was a pharmacy, if you knew how to look, and Ice Age people knew. Not everything was perfect. There were mistakes, poison, infections, cold that turned fingers black. But the persistence of humanity through an Ice Age was not luck. It was skill. Quiet, tested, inherited skill. Now picture that same shelter long ago. A child sits beside the healer, holding a pouch of crushed leaves. They say nothing, they only watch, their eyes fixed on the older hands. They do not ask when they will be ready, they only wait and learn. And someday they will remember how. That hand moved, how that poultice smelled, how the humming changed rhythm when the pain was worse. In the Ice Age, knowledge did not live in books. It lived in people. It lived in the rituals repeated across thousands of fires, in shelters made of bone and hide. It lived in survival and in care. Medicine then was not a cure. It was a way of being together, of resisting despair with presence, with practice and with patience. Let us drift now, not into hardship nor the cold, but into something quieter, something more enduring. In the stillness of a cave, where the air is cool and dry and the walls curve like the inside of a sleeping animal, someone, tens of thousands of years ago, reached out with red ochre-stained fingers and began to draw. They did not do it for us. They did not do it for glory or fame. They simply did it. And the art remains. Cave walls across Europe and beyond are lined with ghost-like shapes. Mammoths in motion, antelope leaping, bison frozen mid-charge, delicate horses with careful eyes. But these were not decorations. They were acts of attention. No one knows for certain why Ice Age people made art. But it is there, in Lascaux, in Chauvet, in El Castillo, and in hundreds of lesser-known sites, etched, painted, and even carved. In relief, imagine a person kneeling by flickering torchlight, blowing pigment through a hollow bone, leaving a stenciled handprint behind. Not a name, not a mark of ownership. Just presence. I was here. I touched this wall. Some images were drawn far from daylight, deep inside winding passages where few ever ventured. To reach them, the artist would crawl through narrow spaces, bearing only a flame and a pouch of ochre, dust or charcoal. The effort alone suggests meaning. Perhaps they were marking places of significance, spiritual or seasonal. Perhaps they were tracing the memory of a hunt. Perhaps they were asking, hoping, remembering. Many animals appear repeatedly: horses, aurochs, ibex. Others, like fish, owls, or abstract signs, are rarer. Some researchers have identified repeated symbols, dots, zigzags, spirals, branching lines. They might have been calendars or clan symbols, or something more personal, something we cannot name. What we can know is how much care went into their creation. Artists used the curves of the rock to shape a shoulder or to give depth to a back. They shaded with their fingertips. They scraped away stone to create contrast. They layered images, sometimes hundreds of years apart. This was not random. It was thoughtful, slow, and yet no tools were left beside the walls, no signatures. The artist stepped back into the dark, leaving only the image to speak. Even portable art, carved bones, figurines, beads, bears the mark of attention. The Venus figurines, found across Ice Age Europe, suggest shared ideas about fertility, survival, or perhaps ancestors. They are abstract, rounded, symbolic. They fit in the palm of the hand. You can picture someone holding one before a long journey, or tucking it beneath sleeping furs, or passing it down without words. There is a stillness in this kind of art, a kind of listening. The artist listens to the world, the movement of animals, the path of the moon, the way blood darkens as it dries. And then, with quiet certainty, they draw it. No rush, no audience, just the act itself. In some caves, handprints are tiny, perhaps made by children. Others show missing fingers, possibly due to frostbite or injury, or perhaps those fingers were folded purposefully to mean something. A code, a story, a memory. Some researchers believe that singing or chanting may have accompanied these images. The acoustics of deep caves resonate in specific spots. Perhaps voices once echoed here, low and rhythmic, part of a ritual no longer remembered. Or perhaps silence itself was the ritual. In any case, these images endure. They have no captions. They offer no explanations. Yet, they connect us. Because even now we draw, we paint, we leave marks on walls. We say, I was here, and though the ice. Age artist may never have imagined us. We feel them, just a little, when we look. Their world was hard, but they paused long enough to make something beautiful, something not necessary for survival, but necessary for meaning. And that is humanity. So imagine them again, in the flickering firelight, eyes narrowed in concentration, hands stained. Red. They draw slowly, carefully on a wall no one else will see for 1,000 years, and when they are done, they leave, quietly. Just a figure fading into the painted silence. Now let us move, not with haste, not with fear, but with purpose, as with rhythm. In the world of the Ice Age, movement was not an escape, it was a way of life. The earth itself required it. Seasons shifted with sharp contrast. Herds moved, rivers swelled or froze. What fed you in one valley would vanish in another, so you followed. Imagine the sun just rising, pale, slow, casting long shadows across snow-glazed plains. Your camp is already stirring. Bundles are being tied, sinew cords looped around fur packs, spears checked, children gently woken. The walk will be long, but not rushed. There is no destination, not in the modern sense. You are not going to a place. You are returning to a pattern, one traced across generations, from river bend to low pass, from grazing field to flint-rich slope. You travel in silence for long stretches, not solemn silence, practical. The wind carries sound far. The snow muffles footsteps. Every voice is saved for need. The group stretches into a line. At the front, the one who knows the path best. Not a map reader, but a memory keeper. They know where the ice creaks too thin, where the land offers shelter, where the bones of last season's kills still mark the ground. Behind them, children, elders, fire tenders. Then the carriers, those who balance loads of meat, tools, skins carefully packed onto travois, simple sleds pulled by hand or dragged behind shaggy dogs, if the group is lucky enough to have them. At the back, the watchers, quiet, alert, listening. For wolves, for change, the landscape rolls out in great quiet sheets, frozen rivers, distant trees, the occasional scatter of boulders left behind by ice long gone. The wind presses against your cheeks, your hands stay inside fur mitts. Every few hours you stop, not for rest but for warmth, to share dried meat, to adjust packs, to wait for the slower ones. And then you move again. Migration is not always linear. Sometimes the group splits. One branch goes to the coast for fish and shell. Another heads inland, tracking reindeer. You agree on a time to meet again at the red-streaked stone near the bend in the shallow river. No need for clocks. You measure time by moon, by weather, by hunger. Along the way you pass signs left behind. A burnt patch from last year's fire circle. A pile of stones stacked to warn of a nearby predator's den. The ribcage of a kill, weathered smooth, now part of the scenery. If the group has young children or elders with stiff joints, you walk. Slower, always you adapt. At night you make temporary shelter. Not the large bone-framed lodges of your winter home, but something simpler. Hides draped over bent branches, or a hollow among boulders made wind-tight with snow. Fires are small. Wood is precious, but warmth is shared. And in that quiet camp, under wide black sky and shifting stars, you may sing, not loud, not often, but enough. A low hum, a melody remembered from a voice now gone. Or a chant to keep rhythm while tools are checked again, packs adjusted, boots repaired. The next day you continue. Some migrations take weeks, others just a few days. It depends on the season, on the land, on what the animals are doing. Because in the Ice Age, migration is not wandering. It is listening, to hooves, to weather, to memory. It is a dialogue with the earth, and it must be patient. In warmer months, the journey is lighter. You walk through blooming valleys, across mossy ground. You stop more often, share berries, soak tired feet in streams. In colder months, movement is precise. You ration warmth. You time your travel so that you're never caught on open plains at nightfall. You respect the cold as if it were a living thing. Because it is, some groups mark their way with carvings on trees, or stacked stones, or cuts in bark. Not signs for strangers, signs for the self. A way of saying we were here, a memory trail. When you finally arrive at the site you've used many times before, there is work to do. You clear snow. You check for signs of animals. You rebuild what has fallen. You begin again. The act of arriving is not celebration. It is continuity. And so in the Ice Age, to migrate is not to flee hardship. It is to flow with it, to move like rivers, like wind, like herds. To understand that home is not always fixed in place. Sometimes home is the pattern you follow, the footprints left behind, the path that brings you quietly, patiently back to the fire. Imagine a day, at first just like any other, cold, still, the same thick fur around your shoulders, the same soft breath rising into the morning air. But something is different. The river, which should still be locked in ice, flows a little, sooner. And then a season later, something else, more birds than usual, a different scent in the wind, a tree flowering where no flower had bloomed before. These are not dramatic changes. They are quiet, uneven. One winter still howls like the last, but the next is shorter, the next warmer still. This is how the Ice Age ended. Not with a single moment, but with a long, patient shift. A thawing, a loosening. The change would span generations. A child born at the beginning of this transition would never know what it meant. Their children might. Their grandchildren would feel it in their bones. As the glaciers retreated, the world reshaped itself. Rivers carved new paths. Lakes formed where none had existed. Hills reappeared from beneath ancient sheets of ice. Trees moved north, slowly, like a whisper over centuries. The animals followed or vanished, and so the people followed too. Imagine being one of them. You live as your ancestors did, tracking reindeer herds, building shelters from bone and hide, preparing meat with stone, blades, But the reindeer stop coming. The herds are smaller. The land where they once carved is now a marsh or a forest. Your way of life, so carefully passed down, begins to unravel, not from war or famine, but from change. You notice new plants, strange animals, wild pigs, red deer, strange birds. The sea level rises slowly, and the coast where your great-grandparents gathered shellfish is gone. The world you knew is still there, but it is becoming something else. And yet, people adapt. They hunt different prey, fish more often, gather nuts, roots, berries in greater variety. New tools appear, microliths, barbed points, traps. The toolkit of survival shifts piece by piece. They change how they live. Camps that once moved with the herds stay longer in place. Shelters are built, differently, more permanent. The earliest signs of storage begin to appear. Pits, baskets, clay-lined hollows. The first hints of settling, but this doesn't happen everywhere, or all at once. Some groups remain mobile, others adapt faster. But everywhere the rhythm is changing. The Ice Age is ending, and with it, the world of mammoth hunters and vast open steppes fades into memory. Even the stories must change. The old tales of giant beasts, of endless snow, of long marches across the white horizon begin to sound. Like myths, revered, yes, but no longer lived. Perhaps the people begin to tell stories not just of survival, but of loss. Of a time when the stars were brighter, when the cold kept everything still, when the world was harder, but more known. In some parts of Europe and Asia, the last of the great Ice Age animals, mammoths, woolly rhinos, giant deer, vanish entirely, not overnight, but steadily. Their bones become fewer, their tracks disappear. Where once they walked, forests grow, and with this green comes abundance, but also uncertainty. A world less predictable, wetter, louder, more complex. Perhaps, for the first time, people begin to think of land not as a passage, but as a place. And in that place, something else begins. Agriculture, domestication, villages. Not yet, but soon. Within the span of only a few thousand years, the seeds of what we now call civilization will take root. But for a while longer, the people of the edge, the last Ice Age humans, straddle both worlds. One foot in the old silence, the other in the coming noise. Their tools, their art, their stories, they carry both cold and warmth, a memory of wind, a hope for soil. They do not name this shift, they do not write about it, but they live it. And we, thousands of years later, can still feel the turning in the earth. In sediment layers, in pollen counts, in the bones of animals no longer found, but we also feel it in the art, the shelters, the graves. In what they left behind, there is a quiet acceptance. The world changes, and we change with it. So, if you imagine yourself there, on the edge of the old world, hearing frogs where none sang before, seeing green where there was once only white, know this: you would not recognize it as the end, only as something new, beginning. And now, the fire has burned low, the voices have faded, the wind outside hums gently through bone-framed shelters, and you lie still, wrapped not in furs or hides, but in the quiet comfort of your own time, your own world. Still, part of you remains in that older place, in the memory of smoke curling in the air above carved stones, in the rhythm of slow migration, the hush of stories told beside flickering light, in the soft patience of a world built on listening, repetition, and care. The Ice Age was a place of hardship, but it was also a place of wonder, of community, of shared silence and deliberate movement, of people who remembered the land the way we remember lullabies, through feeling, rhythm, presence. We often think of them as primitive, but in truth, they were careful, thoughtful, exact. Every action rooted in meaning, every tool born of and countless quiet attempts, every step placed in the memory of those who came before, and so we traveled with them. We woke in their cold mornings. We learned their medicine. We watched their children draw in the dirt. We followed them as the world shifted underfoot, and we stood beside them in caves, tracing hands in ochre across stone. And now they sleep. As you will soon sleep, the world is warmer now, softer. But somewhere beneath our cities and signals, there is still a quiet place where the firelight flickers, where the snow still falls, where the past still echoes. So breathe. Gently. You don't need to carry spears or scrape hides, but you can carry their stillness, their patience, their presence. Let the cold of their world remain behind you now, like a fading dream. Let your own breath become steady, your own body warm, safe, still, and in this silence longer than time, older than language, may you rest, may you drift, may you sleep.